Thank you very much. I want to get us started right away because we do want to have as much time as possible to hear from you. I think over the last 50 years, if we look at new administrations coming into power in Washington, they almost always face a list of daunting challenges. But when you look at what's confronting the Trump administration, I think it seems unusually, maybe even unfairly acute. Take a look. Can you hear me okay? Take a look at Europe, where some of our oldest and most important allies are feeling shaken by the Brexit vote and by the rise of these populist nationalist parties that are calling into question the very utility of the European Union and NATO. Take a look at Asia, where tensions in the China Sea and the possibility of conflict are rising just at a time when the North Korean leadership is rapidly escalating its already bizarre and somewhat reckless behavior into the realm of the truly threatening. In the Middle East and Southwest Asia, we've been at war now for 16 years, and the military actions that we've been engaged in seem to have done little to stem the security threat that's still posed to us by violent radical Islamic terrorism and its most recent incarnation, the Islamic State. And then there's Russia, where the Kremlin's aggressive efforts to command respect, to recapture some of the ground that it feels it lost over the last 25 years, have now reached beyond Crimea and other parts of Ukraine to new fronts, the electoral battlegrounds of Europe and the United States. So this is what a new Trump administration is confronting, and by itself this would be more than a handful. But the Trump administration faces these challenges and more at a time when many of the key institutions, the principles, the values that have guided us and our foreign policy for the past 70 years are being questioned as they've never been questioned before. Some critics, including President Trump himself, have argued that the costs of maintaining these institutions, of promoting these values, outweigh the benefits that the United States derives from them. Others claim that the very foundations of the post-World War II order are already eroding in a global power transition shift involving the rise of Asia, of China, and India. And still others make the case that the traditional order is under threat by a diffusion of power, pointing to the rise of non-state actors around the world. It's something akin to sailing into very troubled and dangerous waters just at the time that your navigation system seems to be breaking down. In this sea of troubles, keeping ourselves afloat, not to mention making sure that we're navigating forward in a kind of coherent way, is without a doubt a national security priority for us of the highest order. But any proposed courses of action, any solutions that might be brooded about, for any of those to be effective, we need to have support, understanding, and discussion among the American people, and that's why we're so happy to see so many of you here tonight. That's why the American Academy of Diplomacy is here. We want to engage in that discussion, hear from you, and together maybe begin to find some solutions to these questions. To structure our time most efficiently, I want to focus briefly on 3 or maybe 4 key regions of the world, examine the effects of the crisis, the conflicts that I've described against the backdrop of this broader question of existential institutions. Then we look forward to hearing your own thoughts. To start us off, I'd like to turn to my friend and colleague, Ambassador Kurt Volker, who served as U.S. Ambassador to NATO under President George W. Bush, and probably knows more about Europe and the European continent than most of us in this audience. He joins us just having arrived from Brussels, in fact. Kurt, start us out.
Indeed. Thank you, John, and thank you all for coming out this evening. It is a real honor for me to be here and to engage with all of you. As you'll hear, I'm very passionate about these issues, and I'm glad that you are too, as you show by coming here, and I hope we have a great discussion. I want to set out two things. One of them is why I believe the United States needs to be very actively engaged in foreign policy in the world. And secondly, why our alliance with Europe is critically important and something that is at risk right now. The first comes back to who we are as a country, as a people. Our values are what make us who we are. We are about freedom, democracy, market economy, the rule of law, justice for all. That's what makes us who we are. And as a country, we are better off in the world when those values are respected by others as well. Those values are on the ascendance. When those values are under attack or under threat, then it ultimately comes and affects us as well. So we have an interest in how things are developing in the world, independent of the fact that it is what people around the world would want for themselves. And yes, we want that for them too. There's an altruistic motivation to want to see people be successful, but there's also a self-interested motivation to see that our country is going to be doing well in the world. The problem that we have now is, as John outlined in his opening remarks, we have a lot of problems in the world right now. We have an aggressive Russia. We have a very assertive China. We have terrorists that are killing people in our countries, in allied countries, in the Muslim world. We have massive migration movements right now that are changing societies, refugee flows. There are any number of issues that really threaten our well-being. I forgot to mention North Korea nukes and Iranian nukes and so on. The countries in the world that most share our values, that reflect them in their societies, and that will join with us in tackling challenges around the world as we need them, are our allies in Europe. It's not only them. Of course, we have Japan, we have South Korea, we have Australia, but a critical mass is in Europe, and there are allies through NATO. Europe is facing unprecedented challenges itself right now. And you just think about the list of what leaders there are facing. Mass migration, as I said, from the conflict in Syria, from the African subcontinent as economic migrants, also from Afghanistan. They have an unresolved debt crisis. Greece is still a liability on the Eurozone. It's still unresolved. They've had slow growth. They've had issues with job creation. The migrants who've come to Europe are often speaking a different language, different culture, different religion, not integrating in societies. That has caused a backlash in societies where people feel that their own identities are being challenged in those countries. This has given rise to populist movements and nationalist movements on both the left and the right that are challenging traditional governments that are there. People are feeling that their governing elites in many places, Western Europe, France, Germany, UK, are not in tune with what the publics are worried about. And they are pushing for change, much as we've had a change election here in this country. They're concerned about their institutions, the European Union, NATO, even the relationship with the United States, questioning if those things are really serving their interests. And Russia, as I mentioned, has both been aggressive in changing borders in Europe, in attacking two of its neighbors, threatening others that are NATO allies, buzzing U.S. Navy ships in the Baltic Sea, deploying missiles in violation of the INF Treaty, not following the Conventional Armed Forces in Europe Treaty. So there's a lot of security risks in Europe as well. And they're also working to exploit these internal divisions inside Europe to try to divide them further. No matter how you look at it, I think for the United States, for our well-being in the world, we need Europe to be a strong and vital partner. If it is facing all these challenges and frankly failing under these challenges, that's going to hurt the United States directly. So we have an interest in trying to help make sure that they are successful in seeing their way through this. I'm optimistic about it. I don't see any reason why we can't. I also want to be clear that I don't see us having undue responsibility. It's not our job to be the world's policeman everywhere. It is not our job to take care of problems that Europe won't take care of itself. But we have an interest in the outcome, and so I think we need to be a very proactive catalyst to getting things to go where they need to go. And as I said, I do think I'm optimistic. If you just look at the single issue that the current U.S. administration highlights a lot, but is not the only one to do so. Obama did and Bush did as well. Allied defense spending, getting it up to 2% of GDP. I think we are more on track today than we have been in the last 15 or 20 years. That this has been something that I've been following. And I think that in the next couple of years, we will probably get closer and closer to that mark. Partly, that's the pressure that's coming from Washington, but it's also partly the pressure that's coming from Moscow and their need to respond to that. So I am optimistic overall, but we do have a stake in this outcome. And as if we want to deal with the other issues, Russia, what to do about it, Ukraine, what to do about it, ISIS, what to do about it, crises and conflict in the Middle East, China, Iran, North Korea, these refugee flows, we're going to have to be working closely with our European allies. So we need them to be with us and we need them to be strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.